Soul Purpose Insights, a manual for creating a life of freedom. Copyright 2022. Yuki Yoshi, all rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced by any mechanical, photographic, or electronic process, or in the form of a phonographic recording. Nor may it be stored in a retrieval system, transmitted, or otherwise be copied for public or private use, other than for fair use, as brief quotations embodied in articles and reviews, without prior written permission of the author. This publication is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information regarding the subject matter covered. It is sold with the understanding that the author is not engaged in rendering legal or other professional services. If you require legal advice or other expert assistance, you should seek the services of a competent professional. Edited by Christian De Quincy. Design and cover art by Justin Kanalakis. Disclaimer: the author makes no guarantees to the results you'll achieve by reading this book. All personal growth requires an internal work that is responsible by the individual.
Soul Purpose Insight. A manual for creating a life of freedom presents deep truths about the world we live in. It invites readers to realize that our lives are expressions of universal intelligence and points out that in modern world, we face two basic problems: fear and habit. Many of the challenges we face today stem from these two basic problems. Fear and habit, and Soul Purpose Insights shows you step by step how to overcome them and to begin living a life of freedom. Many people live in survival mode because they live from the conditioned part of themselves. However, this book invites you to peel off the conditioned self to release the infinite potential hidden inside your soul purpose, which will allow you to transform from survival mode to living creatively. This manual is for you who got thrown into this earth and have been trying to make sense of it all and feel not only drawn to, but called to awakening the world. This is also for you who intuitively know that you are the creator of your own life and want to dedicate your life to become it. We are all here on earth for two reasons: to express our innate gift fully and to illuminate others through the light we polish along the way. Introduction. What is a life of freedom? How do you feel about becoming the creative director of your own life? This birthright belongs to everyone, but few people live and act with this awareness and the immense possibilities it opens up. A life of freedom means living aligned with universal intelligence. Because you picked up this book, you probably agree more or less with the previous sentence. You might even experience it as a kind of intuitive knowing. This universal intelligence exists as much out there in the world as it does within you. To begin the journey described in these pages, you must first accept that you are part of universal intelligence. You really are, even if you ignore this fact. When you truly understand this perspective and practice it regularly, everything in your life begins to change. This book can literally transform your life. But transformation will happen only if or when you embody the ideas presented here. Reading these pages only once or twice will not be enough. You need to feel these ideas come alive in you as you move throughout the day. Otherwise, nothing will change. Information in a book cannot substitute for lived experience. However, good books, written from the heart, can point us in the right direction. That said, I did write the Soul Purpose Insights for you to study as a way to discover the essence, the true you that has been hidden inside up to this point. Not many people know who they really are. Instead, they live every day on an autopilot, following the same routines, as well as the larger habits of society, e.g., studying at school to get a job. For a great many people, the pressures of succeeding in their careers owns them, as if they sold their souls in return for a life of social expectations. Treat this book like a mirror that will reveal who you really are. I have done my best to make it short and easy to read. By rereading various sections over and over, you can let the ideas sink in and make them part of you. You can embody them. What is a life of freedom? Take a moment to reflect on how free you feel every day. As you reflect on this, you might notice lots of internal mind chatter back and forth. For example, I want to feel free, but I need to go to work. Or I want to feel free, but I have family responsibilities. Or I want to feel free, but I have so much to do and so little time. How long have you been living that cycle? Many people seem to assume that life inevitably deals us these either-or dilemmas. However, this book will show you that life does not have to be like that. It all depends on what you choose. Feeling restricted is the opposite of feeling free. Life's restrictions show up in many forms: physical pain, psycho-emotional distress, financial stress, and so on. When people feel free from these problems, they start living a life of freedom. More accurately, when you align with your essence in sync with universal intelligence, you will begin to alleviate these problems. Problems arise as symptoms of how we live our lives, especially our beliefs and intentions, or lack of them. Think about this question: what exactly prevents you from living a life of freedom? Many of us grow up in an environment influenced by parents who did not live a life of freedom. We went to school surrounded by teachers who, likewise, did not live a life of freedom. Later on, we try to meet expectations set by our parents and teachers. Yet something doesn't quite fit. A life lived according to such expectations doesn't get us excited, so we break away and look for things to distract us. Very often, we go out into the world to work steeped in this frame of mind. During the first 20 years or so of our lives, we search for things that make sense to us and form a network of beliefs. We think we have to do what we don't want to based on beliefs laid down during our childhood and teen years. We condition ourselves based on beliefs constructed by our parents and teachers, and we store these beliefs at a subconscious level. Eventually, the world we see through our conditioned lens becomes the norm. That's just the way the world is. For most people, this way of living life becomes the only way, without ever questioning whether alternatives exist, until some unexpected crisis happens and we get a wake-up call. A life surrounded by people who don't live from freedom knocks us out of sync with universal intelligence. Many think we need to learn to become better people to be effective in the world. I don't think we need to sell ourselves short by denying our own power and a purpose. We all came to this world with a purpose, a direction set for us by universal intelligence. To become better and effective in the world, we need to unlearn all the conditioning we bought into and construct it. Instead, we need to liberate our essence, our own deepest nature and reservoir of infinite potential. If you really want to live a life of freedom, you need to discover the process of uncovering your soul's purpose beneath all the conditioning. I wrote this book to do exactly that. Chapter 1: How I Got Here. The world contains 3 types of people: those who do not believe what they can't see, those who believe what they can't see but do not necessarily explore what it is, and those who believe what they can see and explore to find out what it is that they feel intuitively. When I was 17, I decided to become the third kind of person, to search for and discover my soul's purpose. I wanted to find out what caused the chaos, instability, and emptiness I felt in society. I wanted to find out what drives people to live every day and what was missing. I wanted to find out more about myself. My education at that time didn't teach me about life or myself, and most of what I studied seemed to be irrelevant for living a meaningful life. I grew up in Tokyo, Japan, and always wondered why people were so busy repeating the same routines day after day without questioning what life is really about. The question why always intrigued me, especially so in Tokyo, because it was a small place for so many people. People didn't seem to have their own space to even breathe. I observed them every day, wondering where they were going and why. I was born in Tokyo, but when I was 2 years old, my family moved to Peru, South America. I was fortunate to be able to observe the world from outside because I came from another country. Although a developing country, I experienced Peru as a very sacred place to live. I saw many people working hard just to survive day to day. I have images of street children indelibly imprinted in my heart. Whenever my father's car stopped at a red light, crowds of street urchins swarmed around us, selling candies or offering to clean the windows for a few cents. My father told me they were so poor they couldn't go to school even if they wanted to. I felt sad and confused about the plight of those kids who were about my age at the time, 6 or 7, and I felt helpless that I couldn't do anything about it. 90% of the population in Peru was Christian. They celebrated Christmas beautifully. I could see sparkling tree lights through the windows in every house. This was my favorite holiday, although I loved the fact that the people would gather to celebrate for any reason. From early childhood, I was exposed to a warm-hearted Japanese Peruvian community who knew how to love others unconditionally. Caring topped their list of concerns. I felt I had 20 to 30 members in my family. Unfortunately, this kind of community-oriented life didn't last long. At age 11, I experienced a momentous and memorable year, both personally and nationally. Peru was struck by epidemics of food poisoning and cholera, and terrorists killed 3 Japanese. It became too dangerous to stay. My mother decided to return to Tokyo, leaving my father behind in Peru. Lots of other Japanese left that year too. A world away on the other side of the earth, Japan was a highly developed country. I remember being excited about how everything was clean, shiny, and automatic. Everything seemed to be well organized, and the society seemed to be functioning in a more sophisticated way than I had grown accustomed to in Peru. However, it didn't take me long to realize that although Japan was a far richer country than Peru, the Japanese had their own issues, and they certainly didn't seem any happier than people in Peru. The Japanese high-tech quality of life didn't seem to make much difference to their internal happiness. Being normal, they took it all for granted. Despite abundant technological success, the Japanese seemed to suffer from some psychological deficiency, or perhaps something even deeper. At that time, I didn't know what. I just knew something was missing. Of course, the enormous cultural gap between the two countries allowed me to see Japanese society from outside. I couldn't help noticing how they valued collective activities. However, I also realized that the Japanese orientation to collectivity differed greatly from the value of community I had experienced in Peru. The Japanese didn't have the warmth I felt in Peru. The Japanese in Tokyo needed to develop 2 different skills to survive in their culture. 1, the ability to look and behave similar to others so no one stood out. These helped to create better group cooperation and social cohesion. Being a unique character definitely did not qualify as a plus in Japanese culture, where everyone focused on how to be together as a group. The second skill involved learning how to balance being an individual, living in a fast-paced and crowded urban environment. The Japanese, at least in big cities like Tokyo, have an unconscious need to create their own individual space by not looking at others' eyes and not speaking out in crowded places. For example, they don't apologize when they bump into someone in a crowd. You can see this in train stations, inside the trains, or any busy location in Tokyo. People don't take time to stop and acknowledge each other. This bumping quietly has become a way of life in Tokyo, part of the culture. Dancing into a new world. At 16, I hit a turning point. I studied to dance and soon began working as a dancer. Dance changed everything. I gained confidence and learned how to be professional. But more than anything else, I experienced the art of feeling. Movement per se was always secondary to me. What mattered most to me in dance was the way I felt as I moved. I explored everything I could. Dance also became a tool to construct my social image and my identity. In the entertainment industry, being in front of cameras and audiences became a part of my life. I struggled with my ego. I needed to be somebody in order to keep going. My identity as a dancer did not arise from anything deep inside me, but from by the whims and acclaim of audiences. Feedback taught me what sells, and that's how I learned to create Yuki the dancer. Developing a commercial me happened automatically and unconsciously. Cognitively, I didn't grasp what I was doing. Yet a deeper part of me knew something wasn't right. As I danced, a part of me authentically enjoyed the movement, the music, and the embodied feelings. In those moments, immersed in the experience of dancing, my ego self took a back seat. But such egoless moments didn't last long, and soon enough I would be sucked back into the egoic fantasy. I found myself engaged in another kind of dance, constantly going back and forth between my authentic self and my dancer ego. I didn't know what to do about this, but I knew it didn't feel good. Around the same time, another turning point occurred for me. One day, during a break at a part-time job, I opened a book of wisdom and discovered to my amazement that someone else valued and encouraged tuning into one's own inner wisdom, listening to the voice of the soul. I can't point to exactly what surprised me. However, a deeper knowing convinced me that I can trust my own inner wisdom. I had opened up to the spiritual dimension of reality. By then, I had experienced many things that made sense only if viewed through the lens of spirituality. And this prompted me to pursue deeper understanding of the role of consciousness in this world. On fire, I explored book after book to nourish my soul. These two discoveries, then, dance and consciousness, became the main focus of my life. In Japan, I continued exploring the art of movement and feeling through dance and the inner journey of the soul. Then, in 2005, my intuition convinced me to make a transition. I quit all my jobs and moved to Los Angeles. Once again, life in the United States differed greatly from life in Japan. I enjoyed having my own space and changed my mode of transportation from train to car. The culture, or perhaps the cult, of individuality I had craved in Japan as an antidote to being submerged in the collective now opened wide for me. As my observations and explorations of cultural and spiritual options deepened, my path gradually shifted from a focus on dance to matters of health. I used Pilates as a way to explore my inner journey through movement. For a dancer, the transition to Pilates happened naturally. I then added skills in body work through neuromuscular therapy and began treating people's injuries before eventually pursuing a graduate program in holistic health education. For this, I relocated to the San Francisco Bay Area. I researched stress, which seemed to me a symptom of something missing in people's lives. Not many people look at stress as a symptom, and most think the cause of stress is out there. I always knew the root cause of stress resides inside. Otherwise, it didn't make sense that two people faced the same situation and had two different experiences. The combination of my multicultural background, along with diverse experiences, from mind-body work to dance to health, shaped how I understood myself and the world, all of which guided me to take the path I follow now. For many years, I have been passionate about mind-body health, viewing health not as an absence of disease, but more as a way of living. The body is designed to move because we are movement. The mind works optimally when present in the moment. the only moment we ever really have. This book adds another layer by introducing the concept of soul purpose, the foundation of our well-being, and a key to living a life of freedom. The soul always wants to grow. Question: how did you get to where you are now? As you explore your story, you will begin to see how your environment has shaped your identity. When you understand this, you will have taken the first step toward discovering your soul's purpose. Chapter 2: The World We Live In. Your story helps you understand your environment and how it conditions you. We need to understand the world we live in because our surroundings continue to instill a mindset that does not serve us. Once we become clear about what kind of world we live in, we will be better able to pick and choose what we want instead of conforming to the masses. We live in a dominant worldview or paradigm that keeps us stuck. For centuries, people have looked for answers from science or religion. These two disciplines have shaped many people's values and beliefs. The scientific community follows the materialistic view that everything ultimately consists of dead matter or energy. By contrast, religious communities follow the idealistic view. Everything ultimately arises in mind or consciousness. Although the modern world is dominated by materialism, some people seek peace in idealistic community. Materialistic and idealistic views. Rooted in materialism and mechanism, science assumes that only what can be measured counts as real knowledge. This presents a major problem. We cannot measure the mind, yet the mind plays a central role in everything we measure. Many scientists view brain and mind as synonymous, a big mistake that causes much confusion. Because of the scientific obsession with matter, our understanding of the mind has been retarded. However, we immediately confront a paradox. Everything we know about the body and the world comes as a result of using the mind. But mind lies outside the capacity of materialist science to investigate or understand. It gets worse. Because we misunderstand the mind, we also misunderstand the body. On the other side of the coin, we find the worldview of idealism, which claims that ultimate reality is a creation of mind, consciousness, or spirit. The idealistic community, however, also fails to understand the mind by dismissing the relevance of the body. Spiritual practice tends to focus on subjective experience while paying little attention to the body. Yet at every moment, we exist in our bodies, and this needs to be acknowledged fully. Let's take a look at specific industries and how the materialistic view shaped their values. The health industry in the 21st century. Today's health industry faces two major challenges that limit the quality of health. First, based on biomedical science that treats bodies as machines, modern healthcare reveals many limitations. Second, corporate profit, not people's health or well-being, now dominates healthcare. As a result, common sense now turns to pharmaceutical drugs to treat symptoms and to improve health. The current health model fragments people into separate systems and divides healthcare into matching specialties. For example, physiology, neurology, psychology, psychotherapy. However, every person is a whole and unique individual, not a collection of separate parts to be treated by disparate specialists. Healthcare has disconnected from everyday living, where body, mind, soul, and spirit come into play. We have been conditioned to perceive health as something delivered to us from the outside, not something we are responsible for from inside. The same is true for illness. When we get sick, we tend to think it's something we caught from outside. For example, catching a cold or the flu. In fact, all the viruses or bacteria are already living in our bodies. Over millions of years, our bodies have evolved potent and effective immune systems. Illness then results as much from a breakdown or impairment of the immune system as from invading viruses or bacteria. We remain responsible for maintaining our immune systems by developing a wellness lifestyle. When we treat illness as an outside job, we give up responsibility for what happens inside us, and we remain blind to our relationship with the natural world. This relationship involves both our bodies and minds. More and more, we learn how the mind plays an important role in many illnesses, especially when stress is involved. A scientific biomedical approach to health both limits and misleads. As noted earlier, science relies on a materialist model of the universe, where everything is assumed to be ultimately physical. This leads to the idea that only what we can observe with our senses counts as valid scientific data. Science then relies on sensory empiricism, but events in our minds are not observable by our senses and are not detectable or measurable by instruments or other technological extensions of our senses. Consequently, science and biomedicine are completely in the dark about how the mind works and how it relates to the body. Instead of exploring the mind or consciousness, biomedical science focuses on events in the brain and nervous system. Crisis in education. I am a big proponent of education, learning through all the senses using different ways of knowing. Education develops the foundation for living and how we relate to ourselves and to life. In fact, I believe education is the greatest medicine we can take for health and well-being. Like science, the current education system is also based on a materialistic worldview and emphasizes rational thinking and a search for objective facts. In doing so, it teaches us to suppress our subjective experiences, our feelings, and not to rely on forms of intelligence such as intuition and imagination. Two main problems arise from this. First, we have forgotten how to pay attention to our internal states by being caught up with external facts. Second, we no longer know how to listen to our own bodies or originate ideas from within. We ignore important messages coming from the body and accumulate layers of unconscious psycho-emotional resistances and unresolved issues. Much of the stress we experience in our day-to-day lives comes from all this suppressed, unconscious stuff held in place by the conditioning of our social and educational systems. In short, we keep reinforcing the conditions for experiencing stress because of worldview biases built into our educational system. Current schools use mainly one-directional teaching, which provides information to students but does not leave room for the students to explore their own possibilities. As a result, students don't come up with questions that challenge the existing paradigm. Instead, they learn how to live within the existing box. This not only restricts students' ability for exploring purpose, meanings, and values in life, but also limits the potentials of society by not encouraging the development of individuals who would make sustainable, positive changes. The lack of purpose and values in life makes people feel empty, and that leads to a kind of mindless repetition of daily routines, the autopilot lifestyle. In this sense, our educational system turns us into machines, automatons. To counteract this, our schools need to teach students to learn how to use their minds to focus attention on questions such as, who am I? What is my purpose? Purpose and values should drive people each day. Otherwise, our lives become unstable and less meaningful. The current view of stress. A huge topic reverberates in the field of healthcare. Why do so many people in modern societies suffer from stress? When we understand stress, it becomes a gateway to find a way to freedom, the objective of this book. Many degenerative diseases seem to be influenced directly or indirectly by stress. Realizing this, holistic or alternative medicine aims at illness prevention by educating people to take care of stress before it becomes an illness. Quite simply, stress causes illness. Many stress reduction techniques share one thing in common. They all calm the nervous system by shifting from a sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic, relaxed, balanced state. The relaxed feeling after we eat is one example of the parasympathetic state kicking in. When we exhale consciously, we activate the parasympathetic response. Various approaches to meditation, visualization, guided imagery, and other stress reduction techniques seem designed to change the brain and physiology of the body. Focusing on the nervous system, however, falls short when dealing with stress. To get at the root cause, we need to learn more about ourselves. What happens to the mind, body, and soul during stressful experiences? Stress affects our state of mind and body. It tells us something restricted or stagnant needs attention. When we feel stressed, it usually comes with a sense of insecurity and fear. In order to create a life of freedom, we need to understand what freedom feels like when distress is not present. The more we understand where stress comes from, the more we understand how we can seek freedom. Stress causes dis-ease. By contrast, when we create a sense of ease, we create a path to freedom and health. When we understand the mind, we can begin to live free of attachments to the material world. Nevertheless, we also need to remain grounded in our bodies. Otherwise, we will fail to operate successfully in the material world. Given the epidemic explosion of stress today, many people feel ready to aim for freedom. As part of universal intelligence, we can naturally feel in sync with the universal flow. However, for many people, something stops them from being in alignment. Soul Purpose Insights shows exactly how you can be in alignment with the flow by unlearning what you have learned and by living in the realm of balanced body, mind, and soul. Chapter 3. Discover your soul purpose. Without a doubt, we live in a material world. Our bodies are made of physical stuff, and the things we can see and touch are also stuff, matter. However, we also know for sure that the world consists of more than physical stuff. First, we all experience our own consciousness, which is non-physical. Furthermore, we all experience more than our intellectual minds. For example, we can feel and have intuitions. People also have experiences beyond their 5 senses. In fact, many people have such experiences. Some ignore them, others get curious and explore them. Not too long ago, our science-dominated society rejected the term spiritual, assuming it referred to something unreal or fanciful. Although today, a growing number of people seem more comfortable with this idea. The idea of soul seems less challenging than spirit. People tend to have a sense of what soul means, even if they have difficulty articulating or explaining it precisely. Today, people often use soul and passion interchangeably, or at least consider them intimately related. For example, in phrases such as, follow your passion to fulfill your soul. People also tend to get confused about the difference between soul and spirit. Whatever the nature of soul, it always comes in a body. We use our bodies to express our soul's desires and purpose. For the sake of simplicity, in this book, I will use soul to refer to our individual essence beyond body and intellect, and refer to spirit as universal essence and intelligence. We could also think of soul as individual consciousness and spirit as universal consciousness. In Chapter 5, I will discuss the nature of mind more in detail. For now, let's just refer to mind as that part of us that knows. People often use mind to refer to rational thinking or intellect. However, mind covers a lot more than intellect, logic, or reason. Given this context, I can now identify the 4 key terms in this book: body, intellect, soul, and universal intelligence. As you read through these pages, you will develop a clearer sense of your deepest nature, who you truly are. When we come into this world, universal intelligence expresses itself as an individual embodied soul. Early in life, the soul remains fully open to all experiences. As it grows, it unconsciously absorbs information from the environment. Then, around age 6 or 7, the intellect begins to develop and the soul gets a sense of its own unique identity. This, in turn, plays a major role in how we interact with the physical world. I've emphasized the above short paragraph because in some ways it contains the essence of this book. I invite you to read it many times. When we start to understand our deepest nature and the relationship between universal intelligence or spirit and our individual soul, we come to realize how we currently live our lives. When we discover our soul's purpose, it invites us to think and live differently. Subconsciously, we absorb everything we experience, including all the emotional dynamics from our parents, teachers, and friends. Unfortunately, for many of us, these unconscious influences come from people steeped in the materialist view of health and education. See Chapter 2. As a result, many adults end up conditioned by limiting beliefs laid down during childhood and don't understand why or how they live their life as they do. Fear, a fundamental problem. Our conditioning almost always includes how we value and feel about ourselves, ranging from not feeling good enough, following a fixed path, e.g., going to school, getting good grades, getting a good job. But along the way, failing to live from inside out by allowing external circumstances to dictate how we feel inside. Rooted in our subconscious minds, our conditioning acts like engaging the emergency brake in a car while driving. In a similar way, our self-limiting beliefs disrupt and distort how we respond and act in the world. Our conditioning and beliefs block us from living a healthy and liberated life. We absorb all the traits from our surroundings and experience painful physical and psychological events. As things go wrong, we lose confidence in our ability to navigate the world safely, and we develop a background of fear. As human animals with a long evolutionary history, we have developed a host of defense mechanisms to protect us from the threats around us, both real and perceived. These defenses kick in whenever fear-based emotions arise, and as adults, we react unconsciously and automatically in an attempt to defend ourselves. Over time, these fear-based reactions can get triggered by small or insignificant events, and as a result, we frequently overreact to situations. This sets up a negative feedback loop where our overreaction generates discord in our relationships, and we become even more sensitive to emotional triggers. Unless we take action to break the loop, we can find ourselves in a downward emotional spiral. When we react or overreact on autopilot, we hijack our consciousness. This process of fear conditioning based on limiting beliefs turns out to be one of the two fundamental problems humans have to deal with. Negative fear-based loops keep us stuck. Instead of reacting from fear, however, we can learn to act more in tune with our soul's purpose. In fact, by identifying and expressing our soul's purpose, we can learn to eliminate many of our fear-based triggers and learn to live more liberated lives. Autopilot. Another fundamental problem. Besides the conditioning of fear, we all have to deal with a second fundamental problem, running on autopilot. The more we allow ourselves to be ruled by conformity, the more we reinforce our autopilot. As social creatures, we tend to do things because others do. Biologically, this makes sense because as animals, we want to belong to a group. Yet, doing things because of others does not promote creativity and self-agency. Rather, it promotes habits and a passive state of living. The tendency to conform leads to a passive autopilot lifestyle, lacking intention and purpose. Biologically, we develop a thermostat-like comfort zone that keeps us stuck as we try not to make any waves. Conformity leads to autopilot, and this learned passive mindset prevents the soul from expressing itself fully. The soul is curious and wants to grow and expand. It has purpose. However, when running on autopilot, we forget our life's purpose and lose direction. Conditioning leads to defense mechanism, ego, and defense mechanism, ego, leads to fear. This keeps us reacting to the environment and to our imagined past. Conformity leads to biological thermostat, habit, and biological thermostat habit leads to autopilot. This keeps us in a passive state without a purpose. Discover your soul's purpose. Education comes from a Latin word educare, which means to draw out from within. True education brings our hidden essence to the surface. However, education today focuses on learning new information from outside and mostly ignores the soul, our hidden essence. The soul already knows what it needs and has infinite potential to express. When fully open, the soul eagerly seeks growth and expansion. The soul does not know how to fear itself or limit itself. The ego does that based on the conditioning we learned along the way. Conformity and conditioning go together, and they prevent the soul from full self-expression and expansion. To live a life of freedom, we need to unlearn all the learned conditionings. Doing so, we can uncover how to let the soul express itself fully. The simplicity of soul purpose insights allows you to easily apply its teachings to transform your life. Transformation begins by training your mind, by shifting your perspective on life, and by understanding what you currently do and don't do. Too many people live their lives in fear, seeking others' approval and reacting to the external environment. They trap themselves in an autopilot lifestyle, not realizing they have options. When the soul falls short of full self-expression, the body responds with stress. The body does not know how to lie. As a result, symptoms of stress show up in our bodies as illnesses and dysfunctions. In order to discover our soul purpose, then, we need to overcome the fear born of our conditioning and autopilot lifestyles developed through conformity. By addressing these two fundamental problems, fear and living on autopilot, we can allow our essence to shine through. But before we do, we need to explore and evaluate three important concepts: the nature of mind, body, and personal identity. We created our current lifestyle as a result of our life's conditioning. In order to understand the meaning and purpose of our life, we first need to know our own essence. We need to know the relationship between the soul and our mind-body. In order to create a new lifestyle, we need to re-evaluate what we know or think we know and believe to be true. When we do this, our perspective and worldview will shift. Let's dive in. Chapter 4. Understanding mind and the quantum world. Mind does not equal the brain. It follows then that the mind-body connection is different than a brain-body connection. If a surgeon were to open your brain, he or she would never find your mind inside. Nobody has ever found a mind by dissecting a body or brain. When you are alive, you obviously have a mind. When you are dead, your mind comes to an end too. Dead bodies do not have minds. They are non-conscious. However, their constituent cells, molecules, and atoms do remain sentient, at least for a while, after an organism dies. The Western science-based medical model, developed from studying and analyzing cadavers, dead, non-conscious bodies, in order to understand the body. Neuroscientists search in vain for how the mind magically emerges out of neurological activities in the brain, yet they seem to fail to look at what caused the neurological activities to happen. In order to understand the nature of mind, we need to look at how our history has shaped our current worldview. Newtonian worldview. 17th century physicist Isaac Newton established many of the key ideas in Western science that continue to influence the modern mindset and how we design and operate our educational, medical, and social systems today. These systems that surround us all deeply shape or even construct our individual belief systems, and these, in turn, color our experience of reality. The Newtonian way of looking at the world is called materialism and mechanism, a paradigm that acknowledges the physical world as the only and ultimate reality. This view completely ignores the role of mind or consciousness and also led to the biomechanical view of the body, treating it like a machine, still the dominant view today in the health and medical field. This materialistic way of looking at the world conditions us to rely on our intellect as the way to knowledge, instead of accessing all the body's intelligence. Treat the body as made up of parts instead of understanding the whole body and how it relates to universal intelligence. Look at symptom as something wrong instead of feedback to help us restore equilibrium. Look for experts to fix us instead of becoming the experts of our own body. Search for answers outside instead of unfolding our wisdom inside. In the 21st century, many people recognize the term mind-body and talk about the importance of the mind in relation to the body, although most people seem to equate mind with brain. In short, the materialistic view still dominates, even though more people express a growing interest in holistic perspectives. Mind and body, consciousness, and energy. Materialist scientists cannot discover the nature of mind or consciousness because the mind doesn't exist anywhere. It has no localization in space. Mind or consciousness, the ability to be aware, to know and feel, exists in time, but not in space. The key characteristics of consciousness include subjectivity, experience, awareness, emotions, feelings, none of which exist in space. Note, however, although mind does not exist in space, it does exist in time. The mind, everything we experience, always happens now, in the present moment. Furthermore, mind is always embodied. And although mind and body are radically different, one physical, the other non-physical, they always remain inseparable. You cannot have a mind without a body, and you cannot have a body without a mind. What happens in your body impacts how you feel, and how you feel influences your body. The quantum world. In US society, more and more people seem to be aware of Eastern modalities, such as traditional Chinese medicine and Indian Ayurvedic medicine. Most people have probably heard of meridians and acupuncture, although they might not know exactly what they are. Movement practices such as Tai Chi and Qigong are known by people who understand the subtle, energetic nature of the body. However, because of the strong influence of biomechanical medicine in the West, the field of fitness and exercise typically doesn't consider this energetic aspect of the body. Yoga perhaps qualifies as the first body-oriented movement in the West that talks about the body's energetic nature, the chakra system, now firmly a major part of the fitness industry. In the early years of the 20th century, after proposing his theory of relativity, physicist Albert Einstein won a Nobel Prize for showing that light is made of photons, one of the major discoveries that launched the field of quantum physics. This discovery dramatically shifted our understanding of reality beyond Newton's laws of mechanics. Whereas Newtonian science described the world in terms of strict physical causes and effects, quantum physics reveals that some uncertainty always exists in nature because quantum events just happen spontaneously without any cause. Furthermore, quantum science shows that everything is connected to everything else. Perhaps the most surprising aspect of quantum physics, however, hinges on the role of the observer, i.e., someone's consciousness, that turns quantum probabilities into actual physical particles, the foundation of the entire physical world. In other words, although non-physical, consciousness turns out to be a necessary ingredient of quantum physics, even though science doesn't have a clue why that's the case. Quantum uncertainty means we live in a world that emerges from possibilities. And without going into complicated details, the most remarkable discovery in the new science is that for quantum probabilities to collapse into an actual event, someone must be present to observe the quantum system. Quantum physics is by far the most robust and reliable of all the sciences, and this has profound implications for health and life overall. First, it means that the world we live in cannot be simply determined by mechanistic Newtonian-type causes, as standard medicine tends to assume. Second, because an observer must be present for probabilities to manifest in the actual world, this means that consciousness, attention, and intention plays a crucial role in events that happen at the quantum level. Third, since everything in our body is composed of quantum waves or particles, it means that the state of our minds has a direct and decisive effect on the state of our bodies. This then is the heart of the mind-body connection in medicine and lifestyle, supported by quantum physics. The quantum waves and particles that permeate the body have a certain vibratory frequency. We now know that subjective experience, consciousness, can influence the frequency states of our quantum field, our body's energy. When through quantum physics we begin to understand the pervasive role of consciousness in the physical world, we can begin to appreciate the idea of universal intelligence. We can begin to understand that the soul, our deepest conscious essence, forms a part of the quantum world. We begin to learn that our conscious and subconscious awareness affects us at the quantum level. Physics tells us that quantum probabilities collapse into actual physical particles only in the presence of an observer, consciousness. This means that our awareness can influence the states of quantum waves and particles in our bodies. Our attention creates certain vibratory results, and there seems to be more. The holistic view says everything is connected to everything else, true for both the physical world and consciousness. We live in a universal field of electromagnetic waves or vibrations. Anything that vibrates also resonates with similar vibrations. Resonance happens when things vibrate in a harmonious way. When a group of people laughs, having a good time, they fill the space with resonance. When we walk in nature surrounded by plants and animals, breathing in fresh air and feeling the sun and wind, we resonate with the frequency of our surroundings. Just as our soul already have infinite potential for growth, nature's own universal intelligence creates harmony and coherence to express its deepest universal purpose. We simply need to connect with nature's abundant, all-pervasive purpose in order to support our own well-being. Our conscious minds can originate attention, intention, and thoughts. Our subconscious minds carry all our conditioning, including limiting beliefs about who we are and who we are not. When our conscious awareness creates a certain vibratory state in our quantum field through attention and intention, the body produces specific frequencies. Subconscious beliefs, our mental and embodied conditioning, also affect the body's frequencies at the quantum level. As a result, if we want to do something, but our subconscious mind harbors a limiting belief about it, we will create a conflict in our vibratory frequency. When we align our conscious and subconscious minds with the purpose of universal intelligence, we experience ease and flow in our day-to-day living. This way of understanding the mind leads to improved creativity. Bottom line, through intention, we can consciously choose to align with universal intelligence. And because this intelligence constantly expresses itself through our bodies, we can intentionally create holistic harmony between our mind, body, soul, and the spirit of universal intelligence. Chapter 5. The body has its own language. When we view the body as a vehicle for expressing universal intelligence, we begin to understand it very differently. We use our 5 senses to gather information about the external world, and this shapes our internal experience. While using our senses does help us to live well, we also have other ways of knowing. If we get in the habit of relying too much on what our senses reveal at the expense of feeling or intuition, we risk reacting mechanically to external stimuli rather than generating actions that express our deeper real self, our soul's purpose. The conscious mind drives the body, and the subconscious mind influences the state of the body. The state of our body and the state of our mind have an intimate relationship. Changes in one affect changes in the other. In other words, by changing the state of our body, we can also change the state of our mind. It works the other way too. By changing our state of mind, e.g. our attitudes or how we think and feel, we can affect how our bodies perform. Great athletes know and practice this daily. In this chapter, I will explain the body's kinesthetic awareness and how we can use this to shift our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I call it psychosomatic postural analysis. In this book, we will explore new ways to use and move the body, different from how we typically exercise the body to strengthen muscles and bones. Polarity in mind and body. People often talk about positive and negative thoughts and emotions. Positive emotions include, for example, being happy, joyful, content, peaceful, etc. Negative emotions include sadness, anger, worry, jealousy, etc. When we have these types of emotions, the body experiences one of the following internal felt experiences. Positive thought. The emotion is open, light, ease, or flow. Negative thought. The emotion is closed, heavy, resistance, or stagnant. The mind resides in the realm of time, present moment, and the body exists in the realm of space. Being present in the moment connects us with our own essential nature, as well as with the flow of nature as a whole. It unifies mind and body, but how do we accomplish this? The foot. We cannot avoid the presence of gravity, at least not as long as we live on Earth. And as embodied beings, we necessarily live and move in the dimensions of space. As a result, in order to operate effectively in the actual world, we need to constantly adapt to the facts of gravity and space. Using our lower body, we ground ourselves, e.g., feet planted firmly on the earth, and with our upper body, we sense our position in space. Notice that in the midst of chaos, we tend to feel scattered mentally. Lost in our heads, we let imagine and false ideas block our embodied experience. We become ungrounded and closed-minded. More often than not, we don't even notice or feel our feet touching the ground. And for various reasons, including daily stress, we often move through the world with our shoulders and chest hunched, unconsciously protecting ourselves from imagined threats. If we want the body to align with nature's intelligence, we need to ground the body through feeling the energy exchange between our feet and the earth. We also need to keep the front of the upper body open to feel expansive and ready to embrace whatever comes our way. Our feet serve as the body's firm foundation, supporting its entire weight. If we injure a foot, we quickly discover the inconvenience of not having full use of something we usually take for granted. Foot injuries can take a long time to heal because they carry the weight of the whole body. The spine. Your spine can bend forward, flexion, and backward extension. We all know this from daily experience. However, few people realize how our posture affects how we feel, our emotions, and attitudes. For example, try feeling sad when you bend back and extend your spine, or try feeling excited when bending forward. Pay attention to what happens. Body posture directly correlates with how we feel, and as a result also affects how we can think. In today's information-rich society, more and more people know that mind and body directly affect each other. Consequently, more people strive to cultivate good posture. Despite this, most people show little awareness about how they position their bodies in space while thinking specific thoughts. Bottom line, posture involves both physical and mental orientation. We need to think of posture as always psychosomatic. We live in a world full of fields of electromagnetic energy. Since all energy has the natural ability to feel, energy possesses sentience and intelligence. As energy flows through us, it also carries information that expresses nature's deep intelligence. Something else to keep in mind. Posture never remains static. Our bodies constantly move, even imperceptibly, especially at the cellular level. When grounded through your feet, you live in the moment, present with what happens in the field. When your posture includes an open and expanded chest, you have direction and certainty about your aims and goals. While living in the here and now grounds our sense of presence, we need more. We also need a clear direction. Yes, we need to be fully present because in reality, that's all we have. However, as just noted, we also need to orient our present to some desired or intended future. Psychosomatic posture. Now let's examine more closely the polarity of mind and body. Positive thoughts feel good in the body, a sense of openness and flow in harmony with universal intelligence. We all want to feel this harmony and alignment, and we can facilitate the experience by practicing lengthening our spine upwards. However, in modern society, people spend more of their time in sitting positions, slaves to our computers. For most people, this means slouching with rounded backs. To counteract this, we need to practice extending our spines. Moving into action engages the lower body. Our spines have both a root and a crown. We want to feel a two-directional reach. The root of the spine releases downward into the ground, and the crown of the spine suspends upward toward the sky. The words release and suspend indicate a sense of ease rather than making an effort to stay in a certain position. The body needs to be at ease for energy to flow through. The moment we apply too much effort, we start heading in the wrong direction. We cannot fight gravity. It operates all around us all the time. Instead of resisting gravity, ultimately a futile exercise, we need to recognize that gravity also expresses universal intelligence. By aligning with gravity, we can use it to our benefit. This type of kinesthetic awareness can awaken us to how we live in our bodies and can be used to train or retrain our minds to let go of our unnecessary effort and facilitate the directional flow we intend. Eyes, face, and throat. We see the world through our eyes and hear through our ears. It sounds obvious, yet not many people realize that where we direct our eyes influences our state of mind. To feel good, open, and optimistic, you want to look and then move forward. Once in a while, you want to look down to check your current position. We all carry our life's history in our faces. Although we can use intuition to sense someone's energy, it's easier when we see them face to face. Your state of mind can be detected in your face. By paying attention to the sensations in your face, you can shift your sense of openness, lightness, flow, and ease. For example, your throat regulates how you express your voice. Every sensation you feel in the throat always carries meaning. If you suppress something, you might experience some tightness in your throat and a weak voice. Having the throat open indicates freedom of expression, how you express yourself to the world. Just as we have positive and negative thoughts or emotions, our embodied feelings can be either positive or negative. The body can be either open, light, and flowing with ease, or closed, heavy, and stagnant with resistance. Once we become aware of the body's felt experience, we can begin working on altering the sensation and thereby monitor and direct our overall mind-body posture. Chapter 6. Identity and sense of self. In the previous 2 chapters, I discussed how mind relates to the thoughts we think and the feelings in our bodies. In this chapter, I will focus specifically on our sense of identity and how it shapes our thoughts and feelings. I will also explain how our sense of identity relates to stress, which happens whenever we think or feel something threatens our identity. In short, we can understand identity by understanding the dynamic of stress. When we understand identity, we understand how conditioning occurs. We will also look at how disidentifying with our conditioning, our stored programming, can release our soul. 3 layers of brain. We have 3 layers in our brains. At the top, we find the neocortex, responsible for high-level cognition. Beneath that, we find the midbrain, which contains the limbic system, basal ganglia, hypothalamus, amygdala, and hippocampus. See image. We call the neocortex the thinking brain and the limbic system the emotional brain. The bottom layer, the brainstem, we call the instinctive brain, the part of our nervous system that readies us for fight or flight. In other words, each of us harbors 3 brains. Higher mammalian for complex cognition. Humans, whales, dolphins, elephants, etc. Lower mammalian for emotions, e.g. horses, dogs, cats, rats, and reptilian for instinct, reptiles and amphibians. When our instinctual brain detects a threat in the external environment, it sends a signal to the emotional brain, and we experience stress. Later, our intellectual brain can understand or make up stories about how we came to feel the way we did. When we perceive a threat and experience its resulting emotion, we often unconsciously project our reactions onto the outside world, making that situation or that person responsible for how we feel. Biological safety and relationship. Biologically, as well as psychologically, we all seek a sense of safety. Stress results from lack of safety, rooted in our perception and conception and expressed through our bodies. The feedback loop between our 3 brains involves a complex web of interactions, but we can simplify it. First, we perceive something in the world and then interpret it as a threat. The neocortex thinks about what we perceive. Next, because we think we perceive a threat, it could be real or imagined, our limbic system responds with heightened emotions such as fear. And then, instinctively, if the threat seems significant enough, our reptilian brainstem kicks in and we either freeze in place or we flee or fight to defend ourselves. Our biological safety functions like an always-on unconscious monitor switch, telling us via instinct whether something seems safe or unsafe, comfortable or uncomfortable, familiar or unfamiliar, and we choose the path that feels safe. What makes us feel safe or unsafe? If Bob and Stacy have 2 different experiences of the same scenario, what produces a sense of safety in one or lack of it in the other? Short answer, our sense of identity produces that experience. Who we think we are shapes our identity, and our relationships shape what we think. This statement holds a little-known key for opening and accessing awareness that can transform stress. We self-identify based on context. Put another way, our sense of identity always occurs within a network of relationships. For example, you are a child of your mother, a friend of your friend, and a co-worker in your job. Your sense of self exists only in relation to others. We might think we form relationships as individuals, but it's really the other way around. We form individuality from relationships. Take a moment to think about your stress and your internal experience. Most stress boils down to one crucial factor. We care about acknowledgement from others. This makes sense because relationships form our identity. When we don't receive acknowledgement, our identities get shaken. Biologically speaking, no acknowledgement equals nothing to relate to. To survive as individuals, we need some type of identification. we need our individual presence affirmed. Example, you're stuck in traffic, not wanting to be late, feeling worried. Your stress level would depend on the type of appointment and the status of the people waiting for you. You might imagine them getting impatient or annoyed, and as you internalize their blame, you begin to blame yourself. All of this happens mostly unconsciously, of course. As a result, your sense of self, your integrity, feels threatened. What if they fire me or award the business to someone else? In reality, your stressful experience does not arise from what the people at the meeting think about you, because you don't know what they actually think. Instead, your stress arises from what you think they think about you. You can think of identity as the role you play in the world. It is also your self-image, who you think you are, and at the same time, who you think you are not. As noted in a previous chapter, when we came into this world, we got exposed to all our childhood conditionings. Our subconscious absorbed this programming from our environment. These patterns, often a combination of fear and limiting beliefs, form the basis of how we react to the world. Early on in childhood, we began to form our self-image, constructed from our perceptions and emotional responses to events in our environment. This conditioning set up our biological safety switch, including our fight or flight reactions. And although formed in childhood, it continues to get triggered in our adult lives. Outside in, bottom up. As we grow and as our intellect develops, we rely a great deal on our five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Now imagine what happens to young minds when dominated by sensory information. Focused on the external world, we allow it to dictate how we feel inside, and we begin to lose our connection with nature's intelligence. This happens because, as a quality of consciousness, intelligence does not exist objectively. It cannot be detected using any of our five physiological senses. When we over-rely on our senses, our perceived world fills with objects, and we no longer connect soul to soul, one subject to another subject. In short, we lose our sense of intersubjectivity, our feeling of relationship with other sentient beings. When the external world becomes our primary drive, we can only react to what's out there rather than choosing to respond based on our own values and goals. Our brainstem instincts and our limbic emotions react to the outside world, blocking our conscious awareness and choice. Unfortunately, in today's stressed out societies, this describes how most people live today. The external world triggering or even blocking out our internal experience, I call the outside-in process. And I call reacting instinctively our bottom-up process. Most people today live lifestyles dominated by this outside-in/bottom-up process. Not surprisingly, this mode of living stresses us out because when we let the outside dictate our experience by relying on our senses, reacting instinctively remains our only option until we regain awareness. Our reactions shape our sense of self. We default to an instinctive mode of living based on fear and self-protection, identity and belief. Our self-identity forms the internal image of who we think or believe we are. Internally, our minds, and externally, our bodies. Our self-image can be either self-limiting or self-empowering or both. For example, you might believe you don't have Michael Jordan's court skills and so decide not to try your hand at basketball. Or you might believe you could never achieve success comparable to someone like Oprah Winfrey, and as a result decide not to even attempt to ever host a TV talk show. While it's true you are not and never will be either Michael Jordan or Oprah Winfrey, that does not mean you could never be successful shooting hoops or being a TV host. Such limiting beliefs reflect and express a limiting self-image. But what makes you think that way, and how do you know it is true? You might believe that genetics play a critical role in success and that you did not get those genes. But perhaps that's not true. We used to believe that the world was flat, and now we know it's global. Before we invented airplanes, nobody believed humans would ever fly. When we re-examine where our beliefs come from, we can alter them. And when our beliefs change, the results we achieve can change too. When we identify ourselves from only a materialist point of view, we tend to get caught up with the five senses and the external world. We begin to identify ourselves based on our past experience and the role we play in the world. However, when we re-examine our beliefs about the world and truly understand we are more than the roles we play, we can realize we participate in and express universal intelligence. When we do, our sense of self begins to shift and we begin to respond from choice rather than react mechanically to external and internal events. Instead of reacting mechanically, like colliding billiard balls, we identify ourselves as a part of universal intelligence. And because the universe operates perfectly, we just need to tune in and align with its natural process. The universe consists of both consciousness and energy, always together. Because of its capacity for awareness and choice, consciousness knows or feels how energy flows through the universe and chooses to direct the flow according to its values and aims. In short, our will and intention can direct energy and alter how events happen. As previously emphasized, we live surrounded by an electromagnetic field. It constantly moves into and through us, and in fact, actually forms our physical bodies. Now, we know from science that energy vibrates, and we know from philosophy, specifically the version known as panpsychism, that energy is intrinsically sentient, that energy naturally has the ability to feel, be aware of its surroundings, and to make choices about how and where to direct its own flow. In other words, energy and consciousness form an inseparable unity where consciousness directs the flow and vibrations of energy from within. That means consciousness, through choice and intention, can both redirect how energy flows and also how it vibrates. Mind can influence the body's energy vibrations. When we understand who we are from this deeper perspective, we can choose to alter our identity. Our choices influence the electromagnetic field in and around our own bodies. That's how consciousness and choice impact the world we live in. When we live with this awareness, we can use our minds to intentionally recognize our psychobiological conditioning and then work on changing or releasing our self-limiting habits and conditioning. Our role in the world reflects and expresses our self-identity. Think of our social role as the outer layer of our identity. We also carry a secret inner layer of self-image that often blocks us or holds us back. In order to live a life of freedom, we need to focus attention on this deeper layer in order to recognize that despite our physical limitations, we always have the option to change or release our self-made psychological limitations. When we do this, we open up to and align with the universal flow, and life becomes much easier. Chapter 7, The Magic Question. What do you want? This chapter focuses on a simple but transformative exercise, repeatedly asking yourself, what do I really want? Most people don't know what they truly want because nobody ever asked them. Deep inside, they might know, yet all kinds of reasons prevent them from accessing what they really want. Most people, therefore, live without knowing their soul's deepest desires. A simple fact makes this clear. If we don't live based on what we truly want, we will continue to fill our lives with what we don't want. The epidemic of stress in modern society bears this out. In order to live a life of freedom, then, you need to identify what you really want. Think of it like solving a problem. You can't just focus on the problem. You need to also focus on the solution. If stress dominates your life and you seek freedom, don't simply focus on your existing lifestyle. Instead, shift your attention to what you actually want from life. What does a life of freedom look and feel like for you? As a useful exercise, continue to ask yourself what you want. Most people begin thinking about their current life situations, where they feel stressed and lack a secure sense of balance, and automatically focus on what they believe they cannot have. When you engage in this exercise, don't allow your current circumstances to dictate or limit what you want. Instead, ask yourself, if I could have anything I wanted, what would I choose? As noted in a previous chapter, we live embedded in a universal electromagnetic EM field that affects most of what happens in our human-sized world. The electromagnetic field condenses here and there to form the objects we encounter in our familiar physical world. However, besides responding to physical fields and forces, we also live in a world rich with consciousness and experiences. Although unexplainable by science, consciousness somehow can produce effects in the physical world, for example, through intention and choice. A simple example will help. You want a drink, and so you intentionally move your arm to reach for a glass of water. Your intention occurs in your consciousness, yet somehow it causes your physical arm to move the physical glass of water. Plenty of evidence exists to show that consciousness and intention can shape and influence the world even beyond our own bodies. In other words, we can use the power of intention to reshape the world around us. Given this ability, it makes sense for us to use our consciousness to organize our lives according to our deepest desires and aims. Because the soul thrives on curiosity, expansion, and growth, possibly with an infinite potential to create, we need to tap into our deepest desires in order to align our lives with our soul's purpose. Think of it like this. We arrive in this world with a blank sheet to draw on to create the life we want to live. What do you want to draw or create? What do you dream of? If you use intention and creativity to draw the life of your dreams, you will begin to feel free. Freedom is our birthright, but we have distorted that birthright through social conditioning. At first, you might find this exercise challenging because for most of us, someone else decided what we want. So let me ask again, what do you really want? I mentioned earlier that curiosity forms an integral part of the soul's nature. Curiosity stems from the fact that the soul has a natural desire to grow and expand. Our desires orient the creative spirit to express itself in ways that optimize our sense of health and well-being. When we understand our deepest nature, we realize that although we live in the physical world, it can and does respond to our intentions when they express our soul's desire. When we express our soul's desire, we live a life of freedom. Before you do the following 3-step exercise, I suggest you read this chapter first. Then go back and answer the questions below. As you work through this process, you might experience some discomfort if you have not given yourself permission to want what you want. Let's begin by identifying what you don't want. Step 1. What do you not want? Fold a blank paper in half and reopen it to create a vertical line in the middle of the paper. On the left side of the line, write down what you don't want in your life right now. Then on the right side of each item, write what you do want. This exercise will give you an idea of how well you align with your soul's desires. Step 2. What do you want in each area of your life? Next, think about how exactly you want to live. Do you want a life of freedom? If so, then you need to express your soul purpose. Take the time to identify sources of physical, mental, and emotional pain. Then shift your focus elsewhere to liberate yourself from the pain. For most people, psychological stress and physical pain show up as two major struggles. Work to develop a lifestyle that promotes your health through good thoughts, good food, and good movement. When you achieve a lifestyle that supports optimum health, then focus specifically on the following 3 areas. 1. Purpose. Do you wake up every morning inspired because you love what you do? 2. Relationships. Which people in your life uplift you day to day? 3. Money. How do you earn your living? As you explore these 3 areas, you will notice that if any one of these fails to meet your desires, things begin to fall apart. In order to sustain the deeper layers of health, you need to align with your purpose and surround yourself with loving and trusting people. Not everyone wants to be wealthy, but nobody wants to lack the resources required for a healthy, satisfying life. Financial well-being connects intimately with our biological well-being. Let's talk about money for a moment, because I see a misconception about this topic everywhere I go. People tend to compare and contrast money and love. Well, how about having both instead of one or the other? I often hear people say, I don't care about money, or money isn't important to me. However, in modern society, most people without money focus on their own basic survival needs, leaving little time for a creative, soul-fulfilling life. We want to aim to establish an environment where we don't need to think about having or lacking it. When we focus on lack of anything, money, health, or love, we emphasize not having something important, and that adds to our sense of stress and feeling unfulfilled. Don't get caught up in lack consciousness. Instead, cultivate a sense of peace and acceptance by balancing your desires for money, love, and health. When you have all 3, you feel free. Rather than focusing on what you lack, use your mind to focus on thoughts and feelings that help you to create an environment you want, with optimum health, love, and money. This does not simply mean that if you think of money today, you will see money in your backyard tree or bank account tomorrow. It means you can begin examining your beliefs about health, love, and money to discover how these beliefs might limit your ability to generate what you desire. When we let go of our limiting beliefs, we begin attracting or creating situations that resonate with our soul's purpose. When you do this exercise, write what you don't want on the left, and then on the opposite side, write what you want in the areas of purpose, relationship, and money. Step 3. Become the director of your own life. Olympic athletes create their lives by committing to a path of discipline and practice. We see movie actors performing the personalities and lifestyles of others. Actors create alternative lives. We see singers performing on stage, absorbing the audience's enthusiasm and taking the excitement to a high level. Well, as Shakespeare famously said, all the world's a stage and each of us must play our part. You too can be the director of your own life, the stage, where you play out your role, your soul's purpose. Using the first 2 steps, I want you now to begin creating your own inspiring life story. Looking at yourself from a third-person perspective will allow you to eliminate your limiting beliefs. In order to complete, although it is ongoing, this exercise, you will need to develop a few mental capacities in order to stay on track. Intuition, perception, reason, imagination, and will. Intuition. Use your intuitive mind to go beyond your conditioning. Use your intuition to connect or reconnect with your soul purpose and to avoid getting distracted by fear. When we experience intuition, we tap into the expression of universal intelligence. Be sure to source your desires and purpose from your intuition. Perception perspective. Notice you can change your experience of something by shifting your point of view, your angle of perception. your perspective. Psychologists tell us we perceive only what we can conceive. In other words, if we don't believe something exists, we are unlikely to ever see it. Our beliefs form a lens through which we see the world. By changing our beliefs or letting go of them, we automatically shift how we view the world. Changing our beliefs changes our angle of perception, our perspective. Reason. Use your intellectual and analytical ability, your reason, to think through what you don't want and to identify what you do want. Use the power of reason to avoid contradictions and to ensure coherence between ideas and beliefs. Imagination. Imagination means using the power of our minds to envision something that does not exist in front of us. However, this power has two sides. On one side, imagination allows us to envision a desired future and then to organize our life toward achieving that goal. But we also often use the power of imagination to conjure up all kinds of problems or horrors that exist only in our own minds. How often have you worried about something only to discover it never even existed? This happens when our subconscious mind overrides our experience. Once you identify what you want, you can begin using imagination to see your way from A to B. Will. As you engage in this imagination practice, you might realize how much your mind drifts toward something else. When you activate your imagination, you might find that your mind gets distracted and drifts away to some other topic. That's when you initiate your other gift, volition, your ability to use willpower to redirect your mind. Your will underlies your capacity to focus. Think of it like a gear shift that can redirect your attention to where you want to focus. Let's end this chapter where we began, with the magic question. What do you want? Use the exercise in this chapter to explore that question as a way to open up your path to freedom. Chapter 8. Overcoming Fear. How to be present. Fear produces one of the two most pervasive problems we face today. It impacts many areas of our lives and makes many people suffer needlessly. When we understand how we learn to react with bodily sensations and the associated emotion of fear, with practice, we can also learn to alter the experience. A simple step-by-step understanding of this should help. Conditioning reinforces fear. Lack of understanding conditioning keeps us susceptible to fear, survival mode. To overcome fear, we need to 1. Take time out and create space for self-awareness. 2. Be willing and able to let go. Identify an emotion that can replace fear. The opposite of fear is faith. Awareness and embodiment of our soul purpose connect us with our capacity for faith. Let's take a closer look. Conditioning reinforces fear. Sometime in our past, we experienced a threatening situation and reacted instinctively by wanting to protect ourselves. Fear arises as a defense mechanism evolved to protect us. As discussed in the previous chapter, fear gets triggered when we think or feel someone or some situation threatens our identity. In order to liberate yourself from the clutch of fear, begin by identifying all the fears that show up in your day-to-day living. So the first step, become aware of what you do as you do it, and practice shifting attention and perspective away from your internal stories, and instead pay attention to what actually happens inside and around you. Usually, people react to 2 or 3 common patterns. Fear stops us from many things, e.g., from making decisions and moving forward. Common fears include fear of rejection, fear of not being able to complete things, fear of lack of money, fear of judgment, fear of change, fear of not being able to say no, fear of losing something or someone, fear of failing. Understanding fear. Once you identify your fear, next strive to understand how your biology instinctively kicks in with fear whenever something seems to threaten your identity. Then identify what you want, your desire or purpose. What do you want to feel instead of fear? How would your perspective or the situation need to change in order for a different emotion to arise? Until you know what other experience you wanted to replace fear with, you will continue to get triggered by your old program patterns of reacting to external events. Our mental and somatic programming, our thoughts and embodied feelings, condition our egos to automatically activate our defense mechanisms. However, you want to achieve what you want by trying to eliminate your ego, defenses, or your fear. As noted earlier, these serve as an instinctive biological response to protect us, an instinct we share with other animals, including reptiles. We need this instinct to defend ourselves from threats. However, we also need to not let fear take us over and dominate our experience and actions. Fear can both clarify our minds and it can cloud us in confusion. We rarely think clearly when fearful. Although fear serves us as a biological instinct, it also blocks us from feeling connected to our higher purpose and our place in the cosmic scheme. Overcoming fear. Once you identify your fear and the feeling you want to replace it with, you can begin to reprogram your patterns. First, learn to simply notice when you feel fear instead of letting the fear own you. If you feel dominated by fear, practicing the following 2 steps will help. Read this chapter every day for the next 30 days. This will help you realize how often fear shows up in your life, your conditioning, and what you can do to liberate yourself from your automatic defense mechanisms. If you only read this chapter once and then go back to your normal life, you will likely forget to do the exercises. And as a result, your reactions will continue to own you. Next, every time you experience fear, practice getting out of your head your stories. You can do this quickly either by focusing on your breath or by touching something and paying attention to what you feel. Using breath and touch, you can bring yourself back to the present moment, shifting you out of your head and into your body. Once you begin noticing fear in your day-to-day life, you can then learn different ways to release that fear. Try writing down the fear and then throwing away or burning the paper. If you do this as part of a ritual, it can have greater impact. Imagine feeling the fear and then dropping it. Then begin to feel the embodied sensations you want to replace the fear with. If you do this mental exercise every time you feel fear, you will begin to develop a habit of letting go of your fear and replacing it with a new feeling. From fear to faith. Fear comes from conditioning, and when we recognize our conditioning and begin to peel it off, we can begin allowing our essence, our soul purpose, to shine through. Our essence does not respond to fear-based conditioning, which shapes our learned identification. Our essence knows it expresses universal intelligence. Knowing your essence expresses the deepest intentions of the cosmic flow forms the foundation of your faith. When you shift identify from ego to essence, you shift from fear to faith and experience a deep sense of trust beyond intellectual understanding. You know, because you know. Beneath and beyond our conditioning lies an infinite potential waiting to be expressed. And when we tap into this version of ourselves, we can begin to trust that whatever happens contains lessons and meaning for us, helping us to grow and expand and to trust faith. The universe does not know fear because trust and faith override any traces of fear we might project. Fear and being present. Fear often arises because we unconsciously associate something in the present with a traumatic event from the past. Basically, memories of pain connect with the current situation, and this generates the emotion of fear. Letting go of fear often means letting go of our past self and being present in the moment. Being present in the moment creates space by removing distractions, and so we can simply be. We always exist in the present moment. Each moment is completely new and gives us the opportunity to ask, what am I really doing here? Living in the present, we shake off our conditioning and allow ourselves to simply be in touch with our essential self. We can be in touch with our deepest self only in the present moment, because when living in the now, our mental stories do not distract us. Most of the time, we don't notice the difference between our stories and what's really happening. What happened a second ago no longer exists. What will happen a second later will not happen until that becomes the new now. And events in the future happen only when what was future becomes now. In short, everything always happens now. Once you become present and connect with a deeper part of you by eliminating your conditioned self, you experience a sense of ease in sync with universal intelligence. This sense of ease, often associated with a feeling of gratitude, comes from your soul's natural self-expression, not from a projection of the ego. Now ask yourself, what do I want to feel instead of fear? Shifting your self-image. When I ask this question, most people say something like, I want to feel calm, grounded, or peaceful. For most people, fear feels chaotic and ungrounds them. The biggest fear for many people turns out to be public speaking. How can you be present in the moment if you feel threatened just by being in front of an audience? How does letting go of conditioning work in such situations? In front of the audience, you might feel nervous and fearful because some past conditioning gets triggered. However, the fear comes from inside you, not from the audience. The audience merely triggers some of your unfinished business. You cannot change the audience, only your own internal mental state and attitude. Depending on the intensity of your past experience, you might not be able to easily let go of your past. In that case, simply start by being present in the moment and at least minimize the impact from the past. Allow the body to feel its natural sense of calmness and groundedness by unplugging yourself from your stories. Begin shifting your attention to imagine the person you want to become. Imagine someone you already know from the media, such as Michael Jordan or Oprah Winfrey. Personalities with a strong and confident self-image. If you feel afraid and they feel confident, that's because they successfully transcended their conditioning and allowed their infinite essence to shine through, whereas your ego still dominates your emotions. Like these celebrities, anyone can transcend their conditioning by identifying the feeling and self-image you want to replace, and then repetitively rehearse becoming the new version of you. Note, your true essence always remains present, but hidden beneath your conditioning and fear. When you succeed in peeling off your old self, you can begin to connect with the deeper part of you that wants to grow and expand. Remember the bottom line. Your natural state comes with a sense of ease and presence, always connected with the totality of universal intelligence. Chapter 9. Overcome autopilot with purpose. In the previous chapter, we saw how fear, one of the two most basic and pervasive problems we face today, dominates the lives of many people. In this chapter, we will now explore the other basic issue: habit, living on autopilot. Autopilot means doing things the same way over and over without thinking or evaluating whether our actions will get us to where we want to go. Like fear, habit also has roots in our biology. As I discussed in the previous chapter, we experience fear because our instinctual brainstem wants to protect us from threats, both real and imagined. Humans share this biologically based emotion with all animals. It serves a valuable biological and evolutionary function: protection and survival. Therefore, we shouldn't strive to eliminate fear, but simply work on learning to observe our reactions and to shift attention to what we want, so these powerful emotions do not overwhelm us. We have already looked at how we form our identities through our relationships. Indeed, I emphasize that individuals exist because of our relationships. Although we always remain unique individuals, we also remain deeply interpersonal creatures. We want to belong, to fit in, as well as forming and protecting our identities. As a result, biologically, we evolved to conform. The problem of conformity. Conformity means a tendency to do something because others do so, without questioning whether others actually know what they're doing or whether it's what we really want. We conform because, as a species, we feel safer belonging to a group. When conformity becomes a way of life, it leads us to live on autopilot, doing things automatically. We stop thinking critically and instead become highly habitual. We see conformity everywhere, among friends and at cultural and societal events. In general, people tend to follow the masses. At a deeper level, our society's belief in scientific materialism means that most people never even question whether more than the physical world exists. This too forms part of our conditioning and conformity to a belief system that contradicts our everyday experience. The urge to fit in can create an inability to think clearly or critically. It also prevents us from connecting to our deepest essence, our sole purpose, and from realizing our true potential. In short, many of us tend to develop a habitual autopilot lifestyle with no clear direction. Know your habits. We are creatures of habit, often acting without conscious deliberation. Result, habits tend to dominate our behaviors and cognition and shape our personalities. Modern society conditions us to pay far more attention to our surface personalities than to our deeper soul's essence. What habits form your personality? Beware of living aimlessly, day in and day out, repeating the same patterns automatically. This includes the thoughts you think and the feelings you feel. You probably already know that you tend to think the same thoughts repetitively. Most people agree when I say, thoughts lead to action and actions lead to results. However, when people want a different result, many continue to think the same thoughts and repeat the same set of actions. In other words, most people already know how to do things better, but don't. Why? Well, because most of us, most of the time, live according to our habits. Our thinking and actions run on automatic unconsciously. In order to live a life of freedom, we should never say to ourselves, I don't ever want to change. Our soul, our essence, always wants to grow. The habit mechanism, our biological thermostat. Let's now go deeper into the mechanism of autopilot. I view habits as an expression of what I call our biological thermostat, an automatic sensor that maintains our behavioral temperature within a certain range. At a biological level, our autopilot tries to keep us in a safe and comfortable place. However, this internal habit mechanism stops us from achieving our greatest dreams. Our biothermostat aims to keep us within our comfort zone, often distracting us from our soul's purpose. Biology conditions us to remain within or return to our comfort zone, often driven by attempts to avoid fear. We want to feel safe, and our thermostat takes us right back to the status quo. Courage, the fuel to break habits. In order to overcome habits and an autopilot lifestyle, we must first examine how to break the habit of conforming by cultivating its opposite, courage. It takes courage to break our normal habits. This begins by noticing the habit and also identifying what you really want. Exploring what you really want involves understanding the world you live in. If you really want to be in sync with universal intelligence, the cosmic flow, you need to learn to let go and allow your soul to unfold and express itself. In general, everyone's soul purpose shares a common function: to express itself creatively, to expand and grow. What do you need to change in order to allow your soul to express itself freely? Frequently, change, especially radical change, takes courage. Not least because change takes us into the unknown. We achieve freedom and align with our true self when we activate the courage to leave our comfort zone by living intentionally rather than habitually. A tool to alter habits. The courage to change also involves an act of will, the capacity to focus intention. Will directs attention. Earlier in this book, I emphasized the importance of getting clearer on what you want, your soul's desires. The total of all these wants forms your soul purpose. Why do you want to live the life you want? When you know your soul's purpose, you begin to observe your life from a different perspective. It also works the other way. By observing your life day to day, you begin to discriminate actions that take you closer to your soul's purpose, as well as revealing those that don't serve you at all. Quite often, habitual behaviors fail to serve us. Instead of living on automatic, learn to use your will to redirect your focus to what you want. You might need to practice this multiple times in order for your will to override deeply ingrained habits. However, changing from habit to intention and will can trigger some deep-seated and powerful emotions. Habits act like magnets that pull us into the same behaviors over and over. In order to counteract this magnetic pull, we need to become more present and consciously redirect our attention. Strengthen your will. In order to strengthen your will, you need to build and maintain your ability for focused attention. Try this. While engaged in a familiar activity, e.g., cooking, driving, working on a project, notice how often something else distracts you. This includes thinking about different things. Every time this happens, redirect your attention to the task at hand. When fully present in the moment with a clear direction, you will naturally strengthen your will. Top athletes train themselves to master being fully present and focused. They choose not to be distracted and instead devote their full attention to one thing. Practicing being in the moment with focused attention and intention. You too can develop this skill, one of the key capacities that can set us free. Turn autopilot into intention. In order to break out of conformity, we need courage to turn our habitual autopilot lifestyle into a more intentional one driven by purpose. When we run on autopilot, we tend to become highly reactive and survival-oriented, driven by our instinctive brain, dependent on external situations over which we have little or no control. We need instead to create a life based on intention. Instead of living automatically, we need to train ourselves to choose something different. As Einstein famously said, in order to achieve a different result, we need to think and act differently. Doing the same things over and over and expecting a different outcome, he said, is a good definition of madness. In the presence of strong intention, we become conscious of everything we do. Habit gives way to choice, to an act of will. Begin by observing your actions. How many run automatically? If you find you live mostly on autopilot, it's time to course correct and make choice the primary driver of your actions. This leads to an intentional lifestyle. What inspires you to break your habit? Identifying your purpose can inspire you to act intentionally to break old habits. When you do, you shift from acting on autopilot to living on purpose. When you live on purpose, you feel more inspired. You awaken your spirit and live more intentionally. Successfully shifting from habit to intention requires inspiration. You can even feel a different energy between habit and inspiration. Habit feels like a spinning wheel, going through the same motions without intention or direction. It feels stagnant. By contrast, inspiration feels expansive and pulls us toward our essence. Your purpose can always inspire you. Ask yourself multiple times a day, what inspires me? Once you have identified what inspires you, you can reconnect with your inspiration throughout the day, enhancing your ability to live more intentionally. Habit and self. If your current personality expresses the sum of your habits, then changing your habits means you can become someone new. Your purpose will guide and inspire this transformation at a soul level. You might have a habit of thinking the same thoughts over and over, even if you know this does not serve you. Repeating thoughts or actions that don't get you to where you want to go will never get you there. You will merely keep reacting to the same people or situations that exhaust you, yet you can't seem to stop. As noted earlier, habits result from your conditioning encoded in your subconscious. We came into a world surrounded by people conditioned by their own repeating habits. We shaped our identities in relation to these conditioned individuals, and as a result, we form limiting beliefs about who we are, what we can possibly do, the world we live in, and about health, money, love, even life itself. Let's come back to how you got here. The universe constantly moves and evolves, and because of universal intelligence, we can assume that overall it does so with purpose, even though many events still happen mechanically, e.g., avalanches or tornadoes. We live in an orderly universe where consciousness directs energy, and in a similar way, your mind can direct the flow of energy in and around you by exercising intention, even though many of your own behaviors and external events happen mechanically. You can become clear about your purpose by looking for what inspires you. Whatever inspires you activates your spirit. Bottom line, choose to live each day with a clear intention to fulfill your inspired purpose, and you will avoid living as a slave to habit. You will react less on auto, driven by reactivity and survival needs, because you now live as the creative director of your own life. Chapter 10. Creative Living, Purpose and Presence. And so we come full circle. How do you feel now about becoming the creative director of your own life? Take a moment to look at the world and how people live today. For a great many, simply surviving dominates their day-to-day lives. Part of the problem stems from the fact that society conditions us to rely on our five senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, to inform us about life. However, the way we feel inside our consciousness cannot be reduced to sensory data. Our senses reveal only the material world of physical objects. However, when we learn to understand the world through universal intelligence, we soon realize we have other options. We can live guided by the body's innate wisdom, expressing conscious intentions align with the universal flow. We make things happen when we align with the flow. This book focuses on shifting from lifestyles driven by conditioning to life informed by our essential wisdom. It addresses two basic problems: fear, created through conditioning, and habit, created through conformity. Shifting to your soul's purpose will help you creatively move beyond living in survival mode. Creative living starts when we pay attention to two fundamental elements in life: being present in the moment and aligning with our purpose. What then is your soul purpose? Answering this will open up an experience of freedom, a sure guide that you are on the right track. Being present. The present moment is all we have. Your past is gone and your future hasn't arrived. Everything happens in the present moment. We all carry our past, our embodied memories in our tissues. Psychologists call it implicit memory, and for most people, the past dictates what they will do next. But it doesn't have to be that way. We all also have a conscious ability to choose in the moment. Stored memory, which often holds you back, dominates your conditioned self. Being present in the moment liberates you from the conditioned mind. Fear makes you reactive and pushes you into survival mode. Fear also shapes our perception of the world and often stops us because we remember or imagine what went wrong in the past. To counteract this conditioning, we need to learn to let go of fear. We do this by becoming aware that fear arises from lack of awareness. When we realize where fear comes from, we can then practice letting it go. And when we access our true identity beyond fear, we begin to shift attention to our essence and connect to universal intelligence. A strong sense of faith arises when we realize that each moment naturally and effortlessly flows into the next moment continuously. Know your purpose. When I ask people what they want, most can't answer immediately because either they have never been asked or they grew up in an environment where they didn't expect to get what they wanted, or their parents always decided for them. Imagine growing up with conditioned parents not aligned with universal intelligence. Modern materialist society considers the idea of universal intelligence as woo-woo without any scientific foundation. While that may be true, the limitation falls on science, not on the idea of universal intelligence. Science limits itself to knowledge of the physical world and has nothing to say about consciousness or intelligence of any kind. In fact, science cannot even account for the minds of scientists. Not just human consciousness, but even more so, the idea of cosmic consciousness lies beyond the reach of science. We do not need science to prove the existence of consciousness because each of us has direct experience of our own inner lives at every moment. The idea of universal consciousness comes from spiritual experiences and spiritual philosophy. In short, science can account only for our material bodies, not for our minds. Of course, humans, like all other animals, are more than our bodies. We feel, we know, we make choices, all expressions of consciousness. And because we live in a science-dominated society, people in general lack awareness and clarity about our true nature, and therefore, about how best to live. Most people get by day to day, stuck in survival mode, just reacting to events in the external world. When people conform to the habits of society, they lose their own initiative and creativity. As a result, they tend to live on autopilot, not knowing why they do what they do. To get out of this trap, we need courage to realize how often we simply follow the masses, unconsciously acting against our own and others' best interests. We need to set daily intentions and practice mindfulness of our thoughts and actions. When we begin to recognize how conditioning and conformity shape our roles and identities, the consequences of living reactively rather than proactively reveal themselves. Most of us live by reacting to external events without paying enough attention to what we feel inside. As we practice being in the moment aligned with our purpose, we realize the difference between reacting and responding. When we act mechanically out of habit and conditioning. When we respond, however, we draw on the power of our own awareness and capacity to choose. I call this a response point where the two arrows cross in the soul purpose map above. Responding rather than reacting forms the first step in the process of transformation. As the soul purpose map indicates, when we begin to practice responding instead of reacting, we draw on imagination and begin to choose our internal experience no matter what shows up in external circumstances. Lifestyles rooted in survival and reaction rely on what happens in the outside world. Living this way, we easily fall into the trap of feeling victimized by circumstances, a deeply unempowered way to live. Some people might view this as a reasonable way to live. However, if you program yourself to feel based on what goes on outside, you can only react because you cannot control external events. No wonder so many people feel highly stressed today. We develop a survival brain left on the figure above, by letting external circumstances dictate how we feel inside. However, such feelings always show up as reactions and block out conscious awareness. Unfortunately, most people live according to this outside-in, bottom-up lifestyle. This book aims to reverse that by emphasizing the power of soul purpose to guide us instead to live top-down, from conscious to unconscious. I call this inside-out living. By developing conscious awareness of what bubbles up from our subconscious, we can project what we feel inside to the outside world. In spiritual circles, it's called manifestation. As we expand conscious awareness, we originate thoughts using imagination directed to our end goals. In other words, when you choose your destination, you generate thoughts and feelings aligned with your goal. I call this purpose-driven thoughts. We need to practice inside-out creative living and choose what we think based on the outcome we want, regardless of existing external circumstances. Imagination. Imagination, what you picture in your mind's eye, plays a key role in shifting to an inside-out lifestyle. Most often, when you worry about something, you react to something that doesn't really exist. Try this exercise. Open your eyes wide and notice what you see right now. Then close your eyes and imagine what you just saw. Your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between the two. Your physiology responds exactly the same, whether you saw it in reality or in your imagination. Now, with this awareness, notice how much your imagined fears get in the way of achieving your goals. Some good news. You can turn this around and make your subconscious mind work for you. Note, however, imagination works both ways. We can use it to empower us or block our power. Used creatively and align with our soul's purpose, imagination and visualization can lead us toward achieving our goals. Historically, successful people like Thomas Edison, the Wright brothers, and John F. Kennedy stand as shining examples of people who used their powers of imagination and vision. They knew their purpose, focused on their end goals, and used imagination to get there. Matching frequencies. Our bodies vibrate at certain frequencies depending on our state of mind. And when we understand what this means, our life begins to shift. In practical terms, it means that the thoughts we think and the choices and decisions we make alter our frequency, which can either align with universal intelligence or disconnect us from it. Managing our frequency in this way results in inside-out living. You can change your consciousness to ensure your body resonates with frequencies in the outside world and aligns with universal intelligence. In other words, until you alter your frequency, you will continue to resonate with the same external things in your life. However, most people operate in an opposite way. They wait to make a decision until the situation becomes right. But in fact, their frequency creates the external situation through resonance. In order to change your situation, you first need to shift your frequency by making choices or decisions to do things differently. The power of choice alters how our whole being vibrates and has an enormous impact on our lives. Choice always occurs in the present moment, guided by intention and purpose. Soul purpose summary. What do you really want? Your soul purpose awaits. It's up to you to uncover it, awakening your gift and using it to help others. Only then will you be free. Practice the following 10 points to transform your survival lifestyle into creative living. 1. Align with your soul purpose to attain a life of freedom. 2. How did you get here? Review your story and recognize your conditioned self. 3. Clarify your worldview. We see the world through a cognitive lens based on our beliefs and values, and this determines our experience. 4. Understand the mind by paying attention to your own thoughts and embodied feelings. 5. Understand the body from a psychosomatic perspective, embodied consciousness. 6. Realize that your identity always arises from your relationships. 7. What do I really want? Ask yourself this question many times a day to unlock your true potential. 8. Fear comes from your conditioned mind. Letting go and being present release you from conditioning. 9. Habit comes from conformity. Cultivate courage to follow your soul's purpose. 10. When you align with universal intelligence, fear turns into faith and habit turns into choice by being present in the moment and focusing on your purpose. How to go deeper with the soul purpose practice. Below are resources to truly embody the soul purpose insights, going beyond the intellectual understanding to live your soul's purpose. 1. Soul Purpose School Community. This is where people who are called to awaken the world come together to grow and to expand spiritual awareness, to be in the energy of tapping into creating the life of your soul's purpose. School.com/soulpurpose/about. Second Feeling Awesome platform. In this site, you will find various meditation, visualization, manifestation resources, as well as the recordings of all the past spiritual awareness events and workshops. Feeling-awesome.com. 3. Self-realization. Self-realization is a 6-month program to integrate the self into the soul, to cultivate the divine self in this one life to express calling fully. Satori-mindset.com. 4. Soul Purpose Coaching. We are ultimately a school to train individuals becoming soul purpose coaches. That is, to embody the awareness of becoming the divine self and get the comprehensive training in guiding people from the soul coaching framework. Satori-mindset.com/scoaching.
Yuki Yoshi, former professional dancer, turned into a messenger on earth, guiding people to embody spiritual awareness and the divine self. Yuki began his journey of spirituality and the exploration of consciousness at 17. He connected the dots between the soma, body and the whole, the mind and the subconscious mind, spirituality and personal development, providing a framework, a point of view for people to holistically demonstrate self-realization and fulfillment of their desire in life.